Thanks everybody for joining. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. All right, I think I'll get us started. So first, I wanted to welcome everyone to Friends of Clark County's June forum. We have a really interesting and timely topic. And so just a couple of things I want to cover before we get started. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Justin Berger. I'm a vegetable farmer here in Clark County and live and farm just outside of Yakult, an unincorporated Clark County. If you're not familiar with Friends of Clark County, Friends of Clark County is a nonprofit, a 501c3 that is working particularly and is the only organization in Clark County that defends the Growth Management Act. So we recognize the urgencies we face to protect natural resources and community resources, such as water, local farming, forest lands, parks and trails, wildlife habitats for future generations. I'll say just from a personal note, I joined the board of Friends of Clark County after trying really hard to find out as much as I could about some mining that was happening or proposed to be happening near my farm. I found it really difficult to find anything. And every time I Googled the topic, Friends of Clark County came up. They seemed very engaged in the topic and has made some impacts there. So really had a great experience with Friends of Clark County and appreciate the opportunity to facilitate this discussion. I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. So in terms of the format, our panelists will present for about 45 minutes. That will give some context around our conversation. And then we'll have about 25 minutes for a panel discussion. We've asked folks in advance of the event to ask some questions. And so we have those ready. I'll also ask too, if you have any questions as the event goes on, feel free to drop those in the chat. Even if we can't get to those questions during the event, we'll follow up via email after the event and make sure that those get to the right people. Also, if you need any help or have any issues, feel free to direct message Friends of Clark County in the chat. And following the webinar, we'll share the materials that were presented here with everybody via email and share the link to the recording and ask you to fill out a brief survey about the event. So thanks again for being here. Wanted to introduce you to our panelists. Our first panelist is Wil Fuentes. He's the Clark County Commissioner for District 3. We also have Jenna Kay, who's a senior long-range planner for Clark County Community Planning, and Bryan Snodgrass, who's the principal land use planner for the City of Vancouver. To get us started, Commissioner Fuentes is going to be giving a presentation to give us a bit more context around the comprehensive plan. So I'll hand it over to Wil.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you so much for that introduction. Just one clarification. We're not commissioners anymore. That was back in 2013, 2014. We are county councilors, but thank you again. Thank you, Friends of Clark County. it's unfortunate that it's the only organization in Clark County that advocates for the Growth Management Act. I wish we had more, but we at least have this. So thank you, Friends of Clark County, for giving me an opportunity to share with you a little bit about the Growth Management Act and Clark County's comprehensive plan. So just to give you a quick overview, this is very, very high level. There are some questions related to the comprehensive plan and to the Growth Management Act at the end of the presentation. And as Justin mentioned, if there are questions that don't get answered, please feel free to reach out to Friends of Clark County. Feel free to reach out to me. I believe I have my contact information at the end of this presentation. So cool, let's get started. What is the Growth Management Act? Well, the GMA, or the Growth Management Act, was a response to Washington State's rapid growth in the late 1980s. So as Seattle, Southwest Washington, Spokane, these areas were growing really, really rapidly. The state decided, you know what, and residents of the state decided it's time that we need to figure out how we can slow down the growth to ensure that we can preserve our open spaces, the beauty that is the Pacific Northwest. The act encourages urban development in designated areas, so urban growth areas, while protecting the environment, agricultural land, and open spaces. To kind of get an idea of what an urban growth area is, think the city of Vancouver. So anything outside of the city of Vancouver and urban areas like Orchards, Salmon Creek, Philida, and Hazeldale, those are all within the urban growth area. Now, it is designed to help counties and cities plan for the future, balancing economic growth and environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. Little history of the Growth Management Act. The GMA was enacted in 1990 by the Washington State Legislature. It was the state's attempt, again, to manage the impacts of urbanization while preserving rural spaces and farmland. Over time, the GMA has evolved and now includes 15 planning elements. Some of these elements include things like housing, transportation, economic development, and a few more. The most recent one that was just added this time around was the climate change element. Next slide, please. The urban growth areas in Clark County, I mentioned one of them, which is the Vancouver urban growth area, but every jurisdiction in Clark County has an urban growth area. So it has its city limits, and then it has additional land that cities can grow within that area. Clark County, being rapidly a growing region, has several, as I mentioned, designated urban growth areas to accommodate future growth. Cities like Battleground, Washougal, Camas, La Center all have urban growth areas. These areas have been carefully planned to ensure development doesn't spill into rural lands, which allows us to preserve the county's natural resources, farmland, and open spaces. Now let's talk a little bit about the Clark County Comprehensive Plan. Now, this is long-term vision and planning document for land use in the county. It's a roadmap for the next 20 years. It includes policies on how and where development should occur, how to protect critical areas, and how to create a sustainable community. The 2024-2025 update is critical, and the county must incorporate climate change considerations into this new plan. One thing to consider, to remember, that it is updated every 10 years with major updates due now in 2025. And I mentioned the most critical element that wasn't in other comprehensive plan updates is the 15th element, which is climate. Next slide. So the 15th element, which is climate change, it was added recently as an amendment to the GMA, or the Growth Management Act, which addresses climate change. It does require local jurisdictions, local governments to integrate climate considerations into planning decisions. It's the first time climate change is explicitly integrated into the GMA. It's an exciting opportunity for Clark County to prioritize sustainability in land use decisions. The county will need to assess its carbon footprint, reduce emissions, and protect natural areas from the impacts of climate change according to the Growth Management Act. Next slide, please. So how does this GMA and comprehensive plan, how will it shape Clark County in the next 20 years? Well, it's going to manage population growth. Clark County is expected to grow approximately 200,000 people over the next 20 years. We are one of the fastest growing counties in Washington State. In fact, we're one of the fastest growing counties in the Pacific Northwest. And so the next 20 years will be critical for the county as we see this explosive growth and we manage it accordingly to ensure that we can preserve the environment. The comp plan or the comprehensive plan, NGMA requires to make thoughtful decisions that balance development with environmental sustainability across the entire county. With the inclusion of climate change, Clark County has the opportunity to lead in green growth while addressing housing, infrastructure, and quality of life. Now, what's the role of public input and collaboration? Public input is incredibly critical for shaping the comprehensive plan. Participation is a core aspect of the GMA and the comprehensive plan update. We need to hear your voices, everybody's voices, especially vulnerable and marginalized populations. Marginalized communities need to be heard. The process must include everyone who will be impacted by the decisions made, which means 530,000 people in Clark County will be impacted by the decisions that are made in the comprehensive plan, especially around climate change and growth. As I mentioned earlier, we are expected to grow 200,000 people in Clark County alone over the next 20 years. And it is crucial that we figure out a way that we have a solid plan on how we can accommodate as many people as possible, mostly within our existing urban growth areas. Next slide. So the next steps for Clark County and the Growth Management Act, or GMA. As we are currently in the process of updating the comprehensive plan. Staff at the county has done an amazing job of staying on track, ensuring the county council is updated on the progress they're making. As we move forward with the update process, it's crucial to engage the public and all stakeholders. We will need to work together to find solutions that balance growth, sustainability, and then the climate challenges that we face over the next several decades. The upcoming updates to the comp plan will determine how we manage the county's future, and everybody's involvement is key in this process. And finally, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time today. As I mentioned earlier, we have a significant opportunity to create a sustainable, thriving Clark County. I encourage every single individual who has the ability to stay engaged in the comp plan process and make your voices heard. Whether it's through email, whether you log into county council meetings or show up in person, which is preferable, by the way, to show up in person at these Clark County Council meetings and voice your thoughts, voice your opinions, and your support for ensuring that we create a sustainable Clark County. I don't have the ability to take any questions at this point, but as I mentioned earlier, I believe there is a slide coming up next where my contact information is there. Otherwise, you can always contact Friends of Clark County, but I'm always happy to have office hours at the county to be able to meet with folks, have a cup of coffee, and engage in meaningful conversation about the comp plan and the GMA. So with that, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Fuentes. So next up, we have Jenna, who's going to talk a bit more about the nuts and bolts of the comprehensive plan update. So I'll hand it over to Jenna.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. As mentioned, my name is Jenna Kay, and I'm a long-range land use planner in the Clark County Community Planning Department. You can go to the next slide. My plan for this presentation is to review where we are in the comp plan process, what is complete and what is left, what has to happen by when, and talk about key opportunities for feedback moving forward and where there's room for change. And I'll wrap up by talking from a staff perspective on the importance of public feedback. So this slide shows the big picture schedule for the county's comp plan update. There are 4 key phases of the project: project initiation, shape the plan, review and refine, and the adoption process. And the project ends when the county council votes on the proposed updated plan. I'd like to highlight some of the key steps that have already been completed to date. Those each have a check mark by them on this slide. I apologize, my allergies are acting up, so excuse me while I get a drink of water. Okay, so far, Council has approved a public participation plan and scope of work for the project. Council has selected the county population that we are planning for this planning period, which, as Councilor Fuentes mentioned, is approximately 200,000 more people countywide than are here today. The council selected a number of jobs to plan for and decided on some other key big picture planning assumptions, such as the allocations of how the population, jobs, and housing unit numbers are being divvied up between the county and the cities. The council approved a contract with a consultant who will be conducting the environmental impact statement analysis for the project. There was also a window of time when any property owner in the county could submit a request for a comp plan land use change for consideration. The county started its SEPA process, or State Environmental Policy Act process, issuing a determination of significance and scoping the range and types of issues to be studied in the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. And the County Council has selected 3 land use alternatives to be analyzed further in the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or DEIS. So what's left? So not complete, but in progress, is continued input on county comprehensive plan text and policies and Title 40 revisions if needed. And then also still to come, draft environmental impact statement review, selection of a preferred alternative, the preferred alternative analysis work that has to happen once a preferred alternative is selected. The county needs to issue a final environmental impact statement. There needs to be public review of all of the comprehensive plan updated materials. So the plan text, any development regulation changes, all updated capital facility plans, and so forth. And then for the adoption process, the county needs to issue notice to the Department of Commerce. Planning Commission and Council will need to have their final work sessions. And the Planning Commission and Council will hold hearings. And the process ends with the council voting on the proposed updated plan. Next slide. So there's a more detailed schedule than that one that I just reviewed that's available on the county webpage. We did provide a link to it here. Please note that all dates are subject to change as there are a lot of moving pieces in this project. And in creating a schedule for a project like this, there are some timing pieces that are based on state statute. And some of those I was just going to highlight. So the Growth Management Act, or GMA, says the county's update is due on or before December 31st, 2025. A GMA also says the county has to submit a 60-day notice to the Department of Commerce to review the proposal before there's adoption at the county. SEPA and the EIS process have a whole suite of specific requirements. One of those is that the final EIS must be published prior to the county taking action on the comp plan. Another is that when the draft EIS is published, the county has to have a 30-day comment period. And any hearing that the county holds throughout this process requires 15 days public notice. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so I am going to spend the rest of my time talking about opportunities for members of the public, such as yourselves, to provide feedback throughout the rest of the project and what's left. First, I want to draw your attention to my 2 notes on the bottom of the slide in that blue rectangle. First is, just want to emphasize that you can submit public comments to the county at any time. So while I'm going to focus on a few key opportunities through this process, you can submit comments whenever you would like. Second is, if you want to be notified about when there is an opportunity to provide comment, we recommend that you sign up to receive comp plan updates through the community planning webpage, and the website to do so is listed here on this slide. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to focus on some of the key items still coming up through the rest of this project. And those items are the purple rectangles with a little comment bubble by them. Okay, so starting in the top left corner, This spring, the County Council solidified its decision on the land use alternatives to study further. And the county hosted a few in-person open houses just a couple of weeks ago, and also launched an online open house that is available until June 30th. So I wanted to flag that because that is a current opportunity to provide comment if you haven't done so already. These open houses are focused on sharing what is in the three land use alternatives that are being studied further, and you can provide comment on those alternatives. So your feedback provided at this point in time is one source of information that the county will consider in development of a preferred alternative. Next, the county is going to be publishing a draft environmental impact statement, which will be analyzing the environmental impacts of the three land use alternatives. And when that document is published, it will launch a 30-day comment period where members of the public can submit feedback on the environmental assessment itself and/or thoughts on the preferred alternative based on the content in that environmental assessment. Your feedback provided through that comment period will be reviewed and considered in development of the final environmental impact statement. It's also going to be shared with the County Council as, again, another consideration for them when they are voting on the preferred alternative. So 2 of the land use alternatives being studied include proposals that would bring land that is currently designated as agricultural land of long-term commercial significance into an urban growth area. And based on requirements of the GMA, an area-wide agricultural resource land study needs to be conducted. So this study was not in that original project timeline that I shared a few slides ago. It's essentially been triggered by the cities of Ridgefield and La Center's proposed actions in alternatives 2 and 3. And so just a quick update on where we're at with this. The county is in the process of selecting a firm to help with this work and getting them on contract. And a requirement of the counties when we published a request for proposals is that we are expecting that this work include public engagement. So we don't know exactly what that looks like quite yet. We are still trying to hire a consultant to help us with this work, but I want to flag that as a forthcoming opportunity to provide feedback in some fashion, but exactly what that looks like is still to be determined. This, the resource land study is something that needs to be published before the County Council can select a preferred land use alternative, because it is going to provide key information that they need to consider in considering their selection of the preferred alternative. Once the DEIS comment period is over and that agricultural resource land study has been published, the Planning Commission and County Council will hold hearings related to the selection of a preferred land use alternative. What the County Council decides at the end of their hearing is what will direct staff on in terms of the land use maps that we should be using for the rest of our analysis and updates that we need to make to the comprehensive plan to bring forward at the end of the process. It's also the preferred alternative will be a key part in finishing the final environmental impact statement too. So that hearing there regarding the selection of the preferred alternative is a really key opportunity for providing feedback if you are interested in the county's land use map. Okay, so then council will make a decision on a preferred land use alternative, and staff, we then have to finish prepping all materials that are contingent on what that preferred alternative is. Once all proposed changes to the comp plan are ready, it will launch us into the adoption process, and the Planning Commission and Council will again hold hearings. And this time, the hearings are on approval of the entire proposed updated comp plan. So this is the final opportunity to provide testimony before Council votes, making a final decision on this project. Since the previous hearing is really focused on the preferred land use alternative. This last hearing is a really good opportunity to chime in on anything else that you want to comment about that is in the plan. So that would be, for instance, if you're interested in the new climate element and the policies being proposed there, this would be the hearing related to those policies before they get voted on. All right, and then once council votes, that gets documented in the adopting ordinance, and it goes into effect 10 days later. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Just wanted to take a moment to reflect on, from a staff perspective, on the importance of public feedback. We already heard from Councilor Fuentes a bit on this. And, you know, there's a few different types of feedback that I wanted to talk a little bit about. So county staff do a lot of what we would call early public engagement. So things like surveys, advisory groups, workshops, open houses, things like that. These are all opportunities for the public to provide feedback that's providing the county with information that gets reviewed and considered and can really help shape and refine proposals that move forward in the process. Then there are opportunities for public comment, such as the 30-day comment period on the draft environmental impact statement. And this is a comment period where there's a little bit more sort of legal backing to this type of comment period. So in this case, the lead agency, and so for the county's EIS, that's the county, must consider comments received during the DEIS comment period and respond to them in the final EIS. So there's a lot more, there's a formality to that comment period that's a little bit different than some of our early engagement opportunities. And then I mentioned there are a couple of key hearings coming up towards the end of the process. And these hearings are being held before a key recommendation is being made by the Planning Commission. And then when it gets to the council, their hearing is being held before they are voting and making a decision. So this is an opportunity where members of the public can advocate directly to the Planning Commission or the County Council. Anybody who wants to provide comment has the opportunity to do so. And you can provide comment either in writing by submitting written comments, or you can provide verbal testimony. We just like to remind folks that when you give verbal testimony, there is a time limit. I believe both the Planning Commission and Council typically allow 3 minutes per person during a hearing for verbal testimony. But if this is a hearing with a ton of people showing up, they may choose to shorten the time to be able to hear from more people in a more efficient manner. So there is a limit. So we like to encourage people, especially if you have a lot to say, to submit comments in writing to make sure you have all of the space you need and want to say what you want to say. And then one other thing of note with hearings is that if you think you might be interested or at least want to leave the door open to possibly appeal the county's decision related to the comp plan, you need to be a party of record in these formal hearings. And so that's another thing to consider if you are considering whether or not to provide testimony or not. And you can be a party of record by providing verbal testimony or written testimony. Okay, let's go to I think it's my last slide. Okay, so before I wrap up, I just wanted to mention and circle back to the online open house that is currently available. You can get to this open house through the county's comprehensive plan webpage or through the link on this slide. The image on the right side, which I know is very hard to see, is just a snapshot of what the online open house landing page will look like when you get there. And I put a star by that green rectangle in the center there. If you click on that, it will open a story map, which is an interactive tool, which will have copies of the land use maps for each of the alternatives, along with text describing what's in each of the alternatives. And then I also put a star next to, there's some additional documents underneath there, such as the starred item, which is, if you just want the written description of each alternative, you can open the documents there. So I'm not going to go into the detail on the three alternatives, just at a high level. The first alternative is the no action alternative. This is required under SEPA and makes us consider, what if we didn't change anything? And then the second and third alternatives are proposed initiatives by each city and the unincorporated county. And alternatives 2 and 3 are very similar in many ways, but there are some differences. And one of those differences is that the site-specific requests regarding rural and agricultural land that were not included in a city's proposed alternative are all in alternative 3. So that's one of the distinctions between those two. Okay, the final thing I'd like to say, and then I'm going to stop talking, is that we're asking for feedback on the alternatives being considered. And it is very likely that the preferred alternative is going to be a combination of these 3 alternatives. So it's not likely that it's going to be just alternative 1, just alternative 2, or just alternative 3. It is probably going to be pieces of each, because these land use alternatives that are being studied create this framework around what can be considered. So when giving us feedback, you are welcome to say, I like alternative X the best. But you're also welcome to say, I like this piece of alternative 1, I like this piece of alternative 2, and so forth, or I don't like this part of this alternative, or generally, this is just what I hope the preferred alternative is accomplishing. So wanted to make sure that was communicated. And I'm going to stop there and look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Jenna. So now to round out our context, Bryan is going to give us some information on Vancouver and their comprehensive plan update. Hand it over to Bryan.
Good evening or late afternoon, and thank you to the Friends for hosting this important, I think, useful panel discussion. I'll speak a little bit about Vancouver's process. We are subject to just about all, not quite all of the same requirements the county is. So I think Jenna's summary just now, which was very clear about sort of the process, I think we have, we go through the same steps ourselves in the city in terms of looking at alternatives, holding hearings this fall, ultimately decided inside Vancouver city limits by our city council, but not before hearing from the planning commission, not before hearing from the community. So we could go to the first slide, please. Just really briefly, don't want to get too bogged down in the details. This gives you a sense of about how much growth we're planning for, probably about 81,000 new folks through the next 20 years, probably about 43,000 new jobs. And so a big part of that is finding where are the most appropriate places for those. In addition to planning for growth, there's also planning for how do we accommodate it and address its impacts, including to the natural environment. Next slide. So this is, we like to show this graphic because it's kind of cool. It just shows the various chapters and elements that we're including in our comprehensive plan, very similar to what other jurisdictions are doing. We do have a chapter on climate, and we're trying to base all of these on equity and inclusion. We have a plan vision statement to the left of this diagram. Next slide. And so I'm not going to go over all of these, but more so than any past comprehensive plan update that I've been involved in and been in them since the Growth Management Act was first initiated. There's really state law that is in part driving or heavily influencing our processes. And the big requirements are that at least the southern cities in Clark County, Vancouver, Camas, and Washougal, need to allow, in Vancouver's case, 4 to 6 units per lot in any single family zone. We also, the other big one is the third bullet, HB 1220, for those who want to look further into that. We all need to, and this applies to the county and the other cities throughout the county, through all of us, need to demonstrate we have capacity for a set number of housing units that essentially the state created for us in after we collectively, led by the county, picked the total population. We now have to demonstrate the number of housing units and not just total units, but at a range of income levels, with a substantial number at below market income levels. So that's a big driver in our process too. Next slide. And this gives you a sense of, as mentioned, a big aspect of Vancouver's plan. I think the county plans and some of the other jurisdictions too, is to looking at equity issues in particular. This gives you a sense of the makeup of Vancouver and how it's changing. And so we want to consider that both in our engagement, but also in our policies and actions coming out of this process. Next slide. There's a number of existing plans. The City of Vancouver, for instance, has a overall strategic plan, which does touch on land use, but also a number of non-land use related issues. These are just some of the other plans we have. We have a climate action framework, for example. And so the bullets here are just some of the high points from those. It's hard to kind of summarize all of those, but many of these kind of goals, I think, shouldn't look unusual for the Growth Management Act or some of the things that also the Clark County and some of the other jurisdictions are trying to do. Next slide. And so this talks a little bit about, it's hard to generalize, but we are generally trying to plan to build up and in. And by in, I mean that not necessarily all new buildings in the next 20 years will be high rises or even mid rises. There will be a lot of utilization of essentially existing underutilized and or vacant land in the city to try and meet our targets. And in doing so, the intent is that also helps with climate issues in terms of GHG reduction, helps with placemaking issues, and to the extent we're able to, and it's a real challenge to limit some of the paving. It can also help with a range of other environmental issues. Next slide. So part of what we're doing also is we're trying to we're going to scrap our existing zoning code and create new. They were originally called place types, but I think most people know them as zones, and so that's what they will be. Trying to simplify our system, provide more flexibility, and just kind of recognize the different types of land uses that are out there. We may add a 10th one here of an exclusive mobile home park zone to recognize the existing mobile home parks in our city. Next slide. And so we also have an EIS process. As part of that, we'll be looking at 3 alternatives. The ones shown here it's obviously kind of high level mapping. It's hard to tell exactly, but these are on our website in detail under, if you just Google City of Vancouver Comprehensive Plan 2045 and look for exploring the alternatives or exploring the possibilities. You'll see we call them possibilities now. They've been on our website for about a month, but essentially what will be the land use alternatives. We're also required under state law to have a no action alternative, which is essentially keeping our current zoning in place. And as part of the EIS, studying what would happen if we did that for the next 20 years. Next slide. So really quickly, I won't go through all of this. There's been quite a bit of process, as there has been with Clark County and the other jurisdictions. There's been quite a bit of visioning involving both meeting groups as they are in the county, in the city and the community, various communities, and also forming groups of community partners to help us advise us as well. Beyond visioning, and have been really for the last couple of months pivoting to looking at specific mapping of what that might look like. And that's a big part of what the EIS will do. And there, of course, are plan policies and comprehensive plan policies, which we have had some discussion to date, and will also be part of this discussion in the EIS, and a zoning code. Given that we have new zoning districts, we're also going to revamp our zoning standards, again, with some broad goals of trying to be simpler if we can. Next slide. So this gets into some of the nuts and bolts about our EIS process, which covers city limits. And I think, as Jenna mentioned, it's critical to understand that the different alternatives that are in the EIS, no one single one of those will be adopted. It'll be sort of probably in all likelihood a mix and match of some features of all of them. And those will be the draft environmental impact statement. We have a target published date, which I think we're going to be able to meet, of July 8th. There will be a comment period that will lead to a final EIS. We will also have a couple of public events around during the comment period, just so folks can get engaged, not just online, but they can come and hear more in person if they want. And that will lead to the issuance of a final EIS probably in mid-fall this year. Important to also recognize this is a non-project EIS, like the other comprehensive plan EIS being done by the county and the other, also covering the other cities. So it's relatively high level. It doesn't analyze an individual property with the same specificity as you might see in, say, an EIS for a single development on a property. Next slide, please. And so this just is the current map for those who have had reason to look at Vancouver's current map. The no action alternative that I mentioned that we're required to do by state law, as are all other jurisdictions. In this case, there's one of the state laws is kind of unusual in that it says if you, as for those cities like Vancouver and Kaminista-Washougal, where we have to allow more units in single family zones, we can allow them elsewhere too, but we have to in the single family zones. There's part of that law that essentially says for those local governments that don't adopt it, the state will just impose it. So effectively, that means if the city takes no action, there will still be, at least in the city of Vancouver, state mandated allowances for the 4 to 6 units. So that's going to be part of the no action alternative. Otherwise, though, it's essentially the rules that are in place today. And as with any no action alternative, it's a useful, important part of state SEPA law. It's a little tricky because it means that by definition, almost, the no action doesn't meet the growth targets that jurisdictions are required to adopt. And if we don't do so, then we potentially face legal action, loss of grant funds. So it's nonetheless a useful analytic tool, but it's not something that's realistic to adopt in whole in terms of the no action alternative. There may be individual parcels or individual aspects of it that we keep and bring forward in our plan, but adopting the whole no action is probably not a realistic option. Next slide, please. So this gets into the two alternatives. I think we just had one, and this is DIS alternative 2, a little more growth in alternative 2, relatively similar. I think both incorporate the new zoning that we talked about that will allow in a little bit more intensity of use to meet some of the growth targets, trying to focus that, though, not in the existing single family neighborhoods, but more in, to the extent possible, in centers and corridors. Next slide, please. And so this gets into some of the numbers and details. I won't go into this a whole lot, but for those who want to look at this presentation afterwards, I think this provides sort of an initial look at some of the comparisons in terms of some of the numbers as you get into comparing the individual alternatives. And the EIS, of course, will need to flesh this out quite a bit more, but just wanted to have this available for those interested. Next slide. A lot of the talk has been understandably about housing, a lot of new state law around that, and a big affordability crisis, but obviously very important too is local economies. This just gives kind of a quick sense of some of the parameters around that. We'd like to accommodate about 43,000 new jobs, got about 100,000 existing in the city. So that's a good increase, but probably about 40% more than we currently have. This is just a breakdown of the different kinds of zones that we're talking about, what might be an average annual wage there. There's no way to require that. It's just trying to give a sense of the kind of industries and businesses that might locate and are likely to locate in the individual types of zones. Excuse me. Next slide, please. And this talks about the a little more detail about the draft environmental impact statement. I think the key feature of any environmental impact statement, I think, as Jenna mentioned, is that it's an analysis, but also sort of an interactive one in that it invites written comment from any interested stakeholder parties, public, so forth. And it requires the lead agencies, in this case, the City of Vancouver, to respond to those comments in the final EIS. So it's a good way of developing a lot of information, then I guess to some extent testing that information because folks can comment on it. Next slide. And so this further along those lines of how the EIS is used, it'll be considered in terms of the comments we receive on the EIS will be considered, as will other information we've developed through the process, city council priorities, planning commission input, community input, and so on. And out of that will be a preferred alternative, which isn't necessarily exactly what gets adopted in the final decision by the city council at the end of this year or early next, but it's probably pretty close. So I think the final EIS would then be something that's probably pretty close to what ends up getting adopted. So obviously it's an important process, but before the final EIS is drafted or considered, we go through the draft process and the public comment period around that. Next slide. So here's some ways to stay up to date. Probably the best thing is just to visit our website, City of Vancouver Comprehensive Plan. You can search based on that and get to it. As mentioned, July 8th is the target date for release of the impact statement. It will be available online. That's probably the best way of engaging with it. There will be a limited number of hard copies in libraries and so forth. And then more detail then to come in the fall. And the graphics at the bottom here kind of just step you through the process in a very high level way. Next slide. So the City of Vancouver, as with any city, doesn't have any land use jurisdiction outside of city limits. Nonetheless, what happens in the Vancouver UGA is obviously a source of interest to the city, as it is to any other city outside its UGA. Future annexations are anticipated under the Growth Management Act. There are no specific plans or timelines at this time. Impacts, though, even if there was to be no annexation, which is unlikely, there are still impacts that go across jurisdictional lines, and this goes both ways. It's not only that what happens in the unincorporated Vancouver UGA influences the city, but I think also vice versa. And so, these are some of the high-level objectives that I think the city has advocated for and will as this process hits the home stretch. Probably try and argue for greater diversification of residential designations and densities in the Vancouver UGA. The HOSAP process that the county has done to date has been excellent. That's a great starting point. We think and we'll probably propose that there be some additional single-family to multifamily zone changes proposed in the Vancouver UGA in order to meet as I mentioned, the Growth Management Act has some pretty stringent targets for new housing, which apply not just to the city, but also to the unincorporated area, including the Vancouver UGA. Part of that also involves having more non-residential uses to provide, say, shopping or perhaps employment opportunities nearer to VUGA housing. That doesn't mean that area will look like the City of Vancouver or should or could. It just means that a little could go a long way here. Some redesignation of a limited number of residential areas to commercial could help comply not just with GMA, with economic development goals, but I think also with GMA climate goals by not forcing folks to drive quite as far as they might otherwise. Next slide. And just continuing with this, I think we also try to facilitate more urban level road and infrastructure standards in the VUGA. And I think we're in support of the county findings so far, that there is more than enough room in the existing city and UGA to accommodate the housing growth, and residential UGA expansions aren't warranted in this update cycle at this time. We're also one area where a little bit of different specific differing opinions is there's a couple of VUGA expansions for employment proposed near Washington State University and then up along I-5 near 208th Street, neither of which we think is needed to meet the growth targets, but also they're very inappropriate places in our view. A lot of parcelization, a lot of critical lands, limited owner support for employment in those areas, limited CRADC support in any of their inventories and so forth. If they do get it zoned for employment, certainly are suspicious. Unfortunately, over time, they would likely just be converted to residential land. Next slide. And that's all we have. So here's a couple of links. And very much appreciate again friends for putting this process, this forum together, and would echo everything that I think Jenna and Councilor Fuentes said in terms of encouraging public input. And if you're interested in what's going on in the City of Vancouver, we welcome and very much invite your input and as this process finishes its sort of last crucial 6 months.
Well, thank you so much, Bryan. So that leads us to our panel discussion. And so, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the event, we had requested questions from the public. And so to kick that off, this question, feel free, any of the three of you, to jump in here. How do the three roles you represent, county elected officials, county staff, and city staff, interact with one another during the comprehensive planning?
Who wants to start?
Jenna?
Sure, I can start and then please jump in. County councilors are the decision makers for the county on the comprehensive plan. So ultimately how they vote is, on the comp plan that gets adopted. But staff, our job is to, follow the planning process, brief the council along the way, and make sure they know, what new legislation has come through that we need to address, what are some optional things we need to make decisions on and get direction from them, things like that. And then Bryan can expand on this, but we do a lot of coordination with the cities just throughout the planning process. We, a lot of it's logistical, we need to know what your council wants by this time to share with our council, things like that. I think the one other thing I'll note is that the city's comprehensive plans do also need to be approved by the county for consistency with the countywide planning policies and making sure, like all those numbers Bryan was showing, we're planning for this many people and all that. We need to make sure everything adds up and aligns. So we do a check at the county level of the city plan. So I'll stop there, and Bryan and Councilor Fuentes, use that on.
Well, I'll just add that thank you, Jenna. You described exactly what a role as a councilor is. As an elected official, we set policy direction, priorities, and of course, we include that in the vision for the future of land use, housing, and infrastructure. And we work closely with staff at the county level to ensure that we have, the information and resources to make informed decisions. So thank you, Jenna and staff. And then Bryan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, there has been and continues to be quite a bit of coordination at both the elected and staff level. I am a staff person like Jenna, and so I take direction from our city council, and we have a particular council member who serves as somewhat of the liaison to this process and represents the city as such. But the county does a very good job, I think, of coordinating with all of the individual cities. County staff holds a monthly meeting. We have lots of individual discussions. In addition to that meeting, there's some level of also communication among elected officials. So it's although Vancouver has a different area it covers, we're doing a different environmental impact statement. We're very much trying to coordinate it as much as we can all the way through.
That's great. Another question for all three of you. So let's expound on the DEIS. What does it do and why is it important?
Well, I have a definition and talk a little bit about that. So the county draft environmental and impact statement, or DEIS, it evaluates the potential environmental effects of proposed projects or plans within the county. So it helps identify and address issues related to air, water quality, wildlife, traffic, and any other environmental factors. And why is it important? Well, it's important because it ensures that decision makers and as elected officials and the public are informed about the potential impacts of a project, which allows for necessary adjustments if needed, and anything moving forward. It also promotes sustainable development and helps protect the environment and public health.
I would just add 2 points to that. One is I'd like to emphasize that an EIS it's a decision support document. It is not a decision document. So what that means is it needs to be done. It needs to be done before county council makes a decision, but it doesn't tell you how they need to vote. The council does not have to choose the least impactful option, for instance. So just like to emphasize that. It's supposed to make you think and have some more information. And the other piece, I was seeing some comments in the chat, so I just thought I'd clarify. There are 2 EISs being done in the county. So there's an EIS that includes the county and all of the smaller cities' comp plan updates. And then as Bryan was saying, the City of Vancouver is doing their own. So think of it as a puzzle piece. So cities got their own EIS process, and then the county and all the smaller cities are collaborating on a separate EIS process.
That's great.
So I would, echo what Councilor Fuentes and Jenna mentioned about the EIS. I think as I mentioned in my presentation, it's good for making comparisons. It's a high-level document, so it is intended to allow for when considering environmental impacts about how that looks on, say, a citywide basis or a countywide basis. It will probably not be as good in terms of saying, what happens in my, with my neighbor's trees, or what are the exact impacts to this particular water body, that kind of thing.
Got it. So I know Jenna mentioned a bit about the ag study. We had a question around that. Why are we hearing about an agricultural land study? What is the purpose of the ag study? Does the ag study get incorporated into the EIS? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I think I generally explained how it came about in my presentation, in that 2 of the cities are proposed to be included in the draft EIS alternatives, some alternatives that include agricultural land. So that's what's the trigger for needing to do it, because of requirements in the Growth Management Act. The purpose, there are criteria laid out in state statute. So I don't know them all off the top of my head, but I encourage you all to look at them if you are interested in this topic, because our job is to do this study consistent with what it says in state statute. We have to do this area-wide assessment. You can't just study ag land in one little area of the county. We need to look county-wide at it. The piece of the question on, does this get incorporated into the DEIS? So we expect to publish our DEIS before this study is done. So the DEIS will have some information on the impacts of the alternatives on agricultural land of long-term commercial significance. That is an example of something you'll see in the DEIS. Then we'll see the output of this agricultural study, and both documents are inputs and are meant to inform the county council in their decision-making around selection of the preferred alternative.
Great. The next question is, how is land use planning a tool for addressing the climate emergency?
I think this is me again, so I'll start, but I think Councilor Fuentes kind of highlighted that this is a new This is the newest goal that's been added to the Growth Management Act. It was added in 2023. And Bryan actually showed some examples in his slides of some concepts that like the city is thinking about, more compact, put things near each other so you don't drive as much, like examples of how some of the ideas of incorporating climate into planning. But just to add to that, if you read the law that added climate change into the Growth Management Act, it's pretty broad in terms of what is being asked of county and cities in their comprehensive plans. So we need to address both improving resilience as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So both kind of aspects of climate change need to be folded into our comprehensive plans. And gosh, I've staff at the county who's been working a lot on this. This is not a short answer, but so I don't want to spend too much time in this meeting on it. But what can I say? I think the resilience topic, from my perspective, crisscrosses so many different things. The guidance we're following from the state is like, think about these 11 different aspects of your community, and now think about all of the natural hazards that are supposed to get worse. And now, it's really expansive, from thinking about things like food systems and agriculture to transportation and infrastructure to ecosystems, right? Lots of different aspects of our community we are being asked to think about and come up with policies for. And then for the greenhouse gas reduction side of things, a lot of it does have to do with, like the examples Bryan showed, how do we build our communities so that it's easier to not jump in a car, right? And travel by ourselves when that's historically what's been happening. And I think the one other thing I'll just add is that it's pretty complicated to do climate planning as part of a comprehensive plan because it intersects so many different things. Like we're working on reducing emissions, but the utilities also are responsible for reducing emissions, in their utility world and all of that. So how do you hone in on what can you actually do in a comp plan has been a really interesting process. So I'll stop there, but happy to talk more about climate with anyone who wants to talk about climate when there is more time.
That's great. We did get a couple more questions related to this. So maybe to get into a little more detail, someone asked, what's happening with the climate action goals and policies that were developed by a volunteer group of citizens over the last 2 years? What do we do to ensure that policy suggestions from the Clark County Environmental Justice Coalitions and the Clark County Climate Community Advisory Group are honored and not deleted or diluted by the Planning Commission or any of the next step processes?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So we did wrap up our work with these advisory groups this spring, and their recommendations are, we are reformatting and organizing them to fit into the comp plan. And we have, I spent 2 meetings with our Planning Commission recently, briefing them on what is in the recommended climate policies that came out of this advisory group work. And we will be doing the same with our county council in the near future once we get on their schedule. So we're at a phase right now where we have our recommendations from the advisory group, and we now want to make sure anybody who wants to know what is in those recommendations, now is the time for us to brief people, answer people's questions so they're comfortable with what it is that's being proposed. So that's the phase we're in now. And then we're going to wait for about 6 months until they get voted on. So this is a little bit weird because we did all this climate work, but it's part of this broader comp plan process. So it's not going to get voted on until the end of the process along with everything else. So that's where we're at, and glad to follow up offline too with any other additional specifics.
That's great. So the next question's for Bryan. So the City of Vancouver was proactive in creating a climate action framework prior to the addition of the climate element in the GMA. Can you explain more about the City of Vancouver's climate planning?
Sure. The city a couple of years back initiated our climate action framework. built around some fairly audacious goals. I mean, we've said that publicly, that an 80% reduction in GHG emissions in by the city itself activities, municipal operations in 2025, and in the community, including private activities, 80% reduction by 2030, carbon neutrality on both by 2040. So those are going to be very, very hard to reach, but they are, I think, important and useful targets. And so in the last couple of years, there's been a climate action framework document. It's on our website. I encourage folks who are interested to look at that. We've done a GHG emissions inventory, which I think kind of confirmed that there is some overlap with land use planning and comprehensive planning. We found that 50% of with activities, public or private, in the city of Vancouver, 50% of the emissions are transportation related, and another, I think, 37 were related to the buildings. So a lot of overlap with land use issues. A lot of the more recent climate work, to my understanding, I haven't been personally involved with it, is now in various parts of the different aspects of projects that the city is doing. We have a green building policy, for instance, which is now implementation is being looked at. We have our own comprehensive plan, which I described, which we're also trying to embed climate goals and policies, so forth in. We're going to have a climate chapter in that. For folks who want to get involved, I would encourage just to do a search on Climate Action Framework or Climate Action Vancouver. Some of the separate policy projects related to that might be of interest. We have an electric vehicle survey that out right now that closes July 30th. So encourage folks to look at that. And it doesn't just describe vehicles, of course, but also the infrastructure and systems around those. So we're taking input on those as well. If you do a search on that, go ahead and do it on electric vehicles is the best way to get there. So a lot of work going on, not just in the city's comprehensive plan about climate, but also in other projects too.
That's great. Thanks, Bryan. Switching topics a bit, do you think food security, meaning a secure source of food for the local population ensured by robust local food production, should be a mandatory consideration in this and future comp plans? Looking for an opinion from Wil, and maybe some comments from Jenna around what the GMA requires, what it doesn't require, what's in county documents. And specifically, has there been discussion about an existing provision that food security may be considered in the countywide ag study, but not a requirement? Folks are wondering how they can ensure that the county does choose to consider that factor.
Yeah, well, to give you a short opinion answer, yes, I think it should. I don't know if it can be included in this year's comprehensive plan, right? But it absolutely, I think it should be required and included in the next round of comp planning. I mean, we got to make sure that we have a secure local food source, right, which is crucial, to the well-being of our communities. What that looks like, I'm not sure. Right, we're 650 square miles of land. A third of it is mountainous, and and about 10-15% of it is urban. And we're growing, right? We gotta make room for 200,000 more people within the urban growth area. And so what that looks like, I'm not sure, but I think as we face climate change, challenges in the next, few decades, and unfortunately, this administration, then we really have to start thinking locally and about growing food here in our county for the over 500,000 people that live here, and those that are dependent in a region as well.
Okay.
And yeah, happy to chime in on the question was sort of noting, I actually see in the chat, David put some of the WACs related to agricultural resource land designation and de-designation. And I believe that this is a reference to one of the criteria there in the ag study has to do with, there's this, you may consider food security as part of something like an agricultural resource study. So when staff issued the RFP for this ag study, We said it needs to be consistent with state statute. So that does include that statement on food security may be considered. So we do expect that as we move forward with this ag resource study, that it is considered. I'm not giving you a very satisfactory answer, because I don't have a yes, it's going to be considered or not yet, because we're just not there yet. But what I would encourage you all, if you think that is very important, make sure you speak up, right? Feel free to send comments to the council. When council, hopefully the next few weeks, we'll have a contract, right? They'll be reviewing it and then voting on it. Feel free to chime in. And then, as soon as we have public opportunity with this resource study, again, please feel free to speak up. So I would encourage you to use your voice as members of the public to advocate what you would like to see. The one other thing I want to say about food security is in the county's climate element work, in development of some draft policies that are being proposed for this comp plan update, we got quite a bit of feedback related to food. And so we actually have 2 goals and a suite of policies related to agriculture and food related topics, including some food security policies that are being proposed, which I think basically, outside of the ag land policies in the comp plan, would be the sort of first food security specific policies in the comp plan. So encourage you to take a look at those and what's being proposed there. But of course, it was done through a climate lens. So it's very much around, when there's severe weather and disruption in our food system, this is what the county needs. So just wanted to flag that if that is of interest to you.
Great. One more related to the ag study. The panelist presentations emphasize the importance of public feedback and opportunities for public comment. The ag land study, however, has been squeezed into such a short time frame. What do we have to say about those of us who are concerned that adequate public participation won't be possible for the ag study to be included in the comp plan update?
Well, let me start off with saying that I recognize that. It is June 18th. Jenna, the RFP closes in about a week, if I remember, or it's closing around this time.
It's closed. We're we're in the contract negotiation phase. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so that's good. But we're June, right? And according to County Manager Kathleen Otto, using examples in other counties across the state, some of these studies can take anywhere between 1 and 2 years. We don't have 1 and 2 years between now and when this comprehensive plan is due, which doesn't allow us for really adequate, public participation, and feedback from community members. So it's a bit concerning. I think we need to have our first draft, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna, our first draft for the comp plan by the end of October.
Right. I think it's a September date, we were told.
Okay, yeah. And so this AG plan, the AG study needs to be done by September, which doesn't allow for a heck of a lot of time for public comment. We're going to do our best to try to squeeze it in. I'm not sure how that'll happen, but at the council, we're definitely working towards that.
Great.
And I was going to say, if it's helpful to just add on, just reiterating what Councilor Fuentes just said. Yes, this is not ideal from a staff perspective, and we have mandates, right? So we are being squeezed between the due date, but then also needing to meet other requirements in GMA. So we are doing our best with the situation we are in, but do recognize more time would be very much, would be great if it was possible. So encourage you to participate. Whenever we have the engagement, please participate in it once that's available.
And I'll add one more thing. I know Jenna, you mentioned earlier that there's many forums, right, for public comment, right, to provide feedback. And I mentioned that it is essential for people to show up in person. Believe it or not, sometimes counselors get swayed by in-person public comment. Right. And it's easy to do, right, than it is when you're reading 30, 40 emails about the same topic. And so I encourage people, please show up to council. I know it's going to add a little bit more time to these council meetings, but that's okay. That's what we're there for. We're there to listen and take this feedback. So I encourage everyone, if you care, about this AG study, really just the comp plan in general, please show up.
Agreed. So the next question is, I understand that a comprehensive plan is important for managing responsible growth for the next 20 years, but I still see sprawl and the loss of ag and farmland all over the county. How does this happen if we go through this process of designing a plan for balanced development? How do we keep that from continuing?
Well, active community involvement. We have to prevent sprawl. I think we have to prioritize, and the city of Vancouver is doing an amazing job, by the way, prioritizing infill development. They're not asking for more land, right? Like a couple of other jurisdictions, Ridgefield and La Center. And so they're really prioritizing and ensuring that they're building up and not out. I think it's important to enforce zoning reforms to protect our agricultural lands. I'm trying to think here. Voters play a critical role by supporting elected officials who care about smart growth, who oppose sprawl, and prioritize preserving farmland and open spaces. Historically, at the county level, we've had commissioners and some councilors who were far more supportive of the building industry than they were about preserving farmland and open spaces, right? I think we're in a great spot right now as the current councilor. Current council, where we're a little bit more cognizant about the challenges and potential consequences of urban sprawl. But I think voters play a critical role. Make sure you're voting for the right candidate.
That's great.
Can I
so
add
the-
one thought there? Sorry, keep talking. And I also would invite Bryan to chime in on this too, if he has any thoughts. He's been planning in the county for a long time and seen a lot. I would encourage to dig a little bit deeper into when you say I see loss of farmland or I see sprawl, what exactly do you mean? Because, and this is where like, I'm a planner, it gets pretty technical, right? But I want to understand what you're seeing. And then I want to look at a zoning map to understand, well, how is that possible? Like, why is that happening? Or what aspect? Is it general low density development? Is it that the urban growth boundaries are expanding? Like, what aspect of sprawl is it? Because I think if you dig a little bit deeper, and feel free, again, talk to planners, we're very nice people, we're happy to talk to you, to understand why what you're seeing is allowed to happen. I think that gets you closer to well, if that's why it's allowed to happen, here's a possible solution. So I think Councilor Fuentes, talked more at some big picture reasons, right? But I would also offer there's a lot of technical reasons on, well, technically, if it's allowed and someone applies to do something, we have to allow it, right? If it's allowed under our code. So encourage you to really dig into the why what you are seeing is happening.
And Jenna, that's a really good, I love that. That's a really good point because urbanization has happened within the urban growth areas. It's not happening outside of it, right? And so it may look like urban sprawl, but it is contained, right? It's not allowed to go beyond those boundaries. And so to your point, but maybe there's an opportunity for densification within the UGA. Maybe it's not happening enough. Again, I mentioned the city of Vancouver that's really, really focusing on urban infill, right? And when I look at the map, I think there's a really big opportunity in unincorporated Clark County within the UGA for urban infill, right? And maybe even containing some of that urbanization within the UGA. But as planners, I mean, you follow rules and you follow zoning laws, and if it's allowed, then you will allow it.
Bryan, anything you wanted to add on this topic?
I thought that was pretty well covered. I'd echo Councilor Fuentes, mentioning of participate in the process. That is absolutely key. But I think also Jenna rightly mentioned that there's a technical aspect to this. And so it's easy to get sort of bogged down in the numbers. And unfortunately, under the Growth Management Act, some of those numbers matter quite a bit. So pay attention to that as well.
Question for you directly, Bryan. What is the most environmentally friendly alternative of the two City of Vancouver options?
Of the two action alternatives, there's a little bit more. They're more similar than they are different. Alternative 2 provides for a little bit more growth. So when looked on a citywide level, so it might be fair to call alternative 1 perhaps a little better, but I think Within city limits, having more growth doesn't necessarily mean more, doesn't mean loss of farmland and things like that. It's within the city limits by definition. So, it might mean some more density. But I think in either case, we would have the same sets of laws of protection of critical lands. Those don't change under anything. And the city, just as did many jurisdictions just last year, updated its critical area lands with increased buffers and things like that. So not a ton of difference. The no action alternative has less growth, as mentioned. It would probably, we included in the EIS because we're required to do so, and it makes a useful comparison, but adopting it whole cloth would not be legal. So I think we have to adopt something that looks more towards the action alternatives in some way, and they're both pretty similar when it comes to environmental impacts.
Great. So same question for Wil and Jenna. So for looking at the county alternatives, which one best protects our agricultural lands and reduces sprawl? If people want to support one of those.
Well, I'd say alternative one, right? Because it maintains the current plan, right? It doesn't expand the UGA, it doesn't give more land to your jurisdictions. Again, there's plenty of land to grow 200,000 folks in the next couple of decades. So my preferred alternative, and I probably shouldn't, but it is alternative one.
And I think I would suggest people think about different pieces of the three alternatives. So I think if you don't want to see urban growth boundaries expand, you would like the urban growth boundaries of alternative one. However, if you're interested in seeing more dense development to accommodate more population within the existing urban growth areas, you probably should pay attention to the upzoning that's being proposed in alternatives 2 and 3. So I would encourage you all to think about the pieces that make sense. I think similar to what Bryan was saying, I'm not sure, haven't seen the numbers, and we're not done our DEIS exactly how much population alternative one probably can't accommodate all of the population growth. So I think it's probably pieces that I would encourage you all to consider. So think about the boundaries, think about what you can do with zoning within those boundaries to help encourage the more walkable, the less sprawling, neighborhood development within there. So I would encourage folks to think about that.
Thank you, Jenna. And that's, again, a very valid point, because alternative 2 does include zoning adjustments and minimum lot sizes, right? And it's something to consider as well. But anyways, yeah, thank you for that.
That's great. So I think that concludes our panel discussion for today. I appreciate the three of you spending the time. I know that you're certainly busy with all that's going on, especially at this time with a comprehensive plan. So thank you very much for your transparency and public engagement. Before we close out the event, a couple of calls to action. The first I wanted to mention was, all three of the presenters have said, get involved, get engaged. So we wanted to give a couple of key call outs for how to get engaged there. The first is to check out Friends of Clark County's comp plan workshop comment period guide and get your comments in by June 30th. Learn about the City of Vancouver's comp plan through the Be Heard Vancouver website, including the different land use possibilities, and get ready for their DEIS comment period on July 8th. You can also sign up to get email updates. We'll include all this information in the follow-up email that we're sending. And also wanted to give a shout out again to Friends of Clark County. We're advocating for the adoption of the Clark County Advisory Group's 136 goals and policies into the 2025 comprehensive plan update, supporting the no UGA expansion and advocating for no loss of agricultural land in the comp plan update, and advocating for a complete and thorough countywide resource land analysis in 2026. I'll also ask too, we're always, Friends of Clark County, looking for additional volunteers and board members. I am the newest board member on Friends of Clark County. It's been a great experience, especially generally understanding not just things at the county level, but the impact of city, state, and even federal involvement in this and all of the decisions that impact us. So it's a great way to get involved generally. And like I said, we're always looking for board members. So feel free to reach out if you want to get involved. And again, we're a 501c3. It does cost a bit of money to keep this nonprofit going. So I'd encourage folks to donate if they can. And I'd say reach out to your elected officials directly as well. These things matter. And like the panelists have mentioned, hearing from the public is really important in shaping what the county and cities are going to look like in the future. So again, thank you very much for taking time out of your day for the panelists, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll have a recording of it, and we'll include this contact detail if you want to get in contact with anyone directly. So thanks again. Have a great evening.